So in the first book of John, chapter 1, verse 5, we read, God is light. We do not read God is like light, or God is becoming light, or God will be light. It says God is light. The spectrum of light is quite enormous, and I've put that picture on. So on the top right side, you will see 10 to the power of 0. That's where the frequency starts. And then to the left at the top, you will see 10 to the power of 24. That means 10 with 24 zeros. That's how high the frequency is on that side. So that is more or less the frequency of light that we currently know of and scientifically can prove. And that includes everything like different rays, that your microwave rays is in there, radio waves are in there. And then in the middle there's this small little slit, the red and all the colors of the rainbow, and it comes out to the bottom so that you can see the whole rainbow color there. And that small little slit in the spectrum of light is what we can see. All the other stuff we cannot see with the naked eye as we sit here today. So everything that you see here around you fits, the material things fits into that small little slit in the middle of the spectrum of light. Now, if God is light, the whole spectrum, and we see only the middle little bit, how much of God do we see and understand? Really not much. And yet here we are, and we talk about God. And sometimes we get into quarrels about God and say, no, but this is the way I see God, or that is the way you see God. And we get really angry with each other. But eventually we have to realize that it's just that little bit that we actually know about light, about God. 2 billion years ago, what Jerry talked about this morning exploded on this planet, photosynthesis. And suddenly the plants started growing and producing oxygen, which made this planet a livable planet. So after that, life started to develop because there were oxygen available. And through this process, life became part of this planet. And eventually, many moons after that, and many solar eclipses after that, here we are today, sitting in the sanctuary, living on this planet, thanks to photosynthesis, because we need to breathe oxygen to be alive. And plants use sunlight, not only to produce oxygen, but also to produce food that they feed themselves with so that they can grow for many years. And they need carbon dioxide to produce oxygen. Now, these days, with the media going crazy about all these things, carbon dioxide is kind of a swear word in our modern world. We get taxed for it. You know, don't move, otherwise you get taxed for it. But scientists say that if the carbon dioxide on this planet fall below a certain level, plants will be starting to die. And if plants start to die, who's next? Us, because there won't be enough oxygen. So there's a balance in nature where there's enough carbon dioxide and enough oxygen, and life can go on. And within all of this is light, is the photons of light. So I am not, and this is a disclaimer, I'm not a scientist. I had science at school level till grade 12. I did pass it. I still don't know how, but I did manage to pass it. And it says on my final exams that I have science. So everything I say scientifically, please go and check me and do your own research. And don't say my words again, because I'm just saying the way I understand this. And therefore I try to make it really easy. So light is built up by photons. And a photon moves at the speed of light. So that's incredibly fast. And our cells in our body communicate with each other on two ways. They communicate through chemicals. They transfer chemicals. And there's also a transfer of biophotons. Now, biophotons is packets of photons that is created by molecules. And molecules are created by cells, if I am not mistaken. So this is the whole process this body functions. So I am built up with cells, and in those cells are the molecules, and in those cells are also the DNA molecules. Now, DNA is a molecule, and we get it from our mothers. They gave us this beautiful gift of mitochondria DNA. And what that molecules are doing in the cell, it tells the cell through this communication, because a molecule have the ability to send out the energy and to receive it. So that's how the communication takes place within the cell. So and the communication would be, you as a cell must develop into becoming part of the ear, or part of the nose, or part of the hand. So that's why we don't have a nose on our hands, because the communication takes place and says that the hand cells must develop into forming a hand. I know this is very oversimplified. The process is much more, but this is the way I understand it. And then I know most people, this is a dangerous statement. A lot of people will understand with me what we're talking about. That's the complexity of this body. So everything in this body is communicating. Everything is alive. Because within everything are the biophotons. And what did we say at the beginning? God is light. And light is built up by photons. What is in your body? And that's the wonder of nature and of us as human beings, that we have God within us, because we have light within us and we have communication within us. And all of this is important when we start to talk about this morning, about the healing that Jesus Christ did. And there's always a lot of questions, especially in theology. Did this really happen? It's one of the questions that are asked. How did it happen? How is it possible? Does it prove that Jesus have magic? Or does it prove that he's the Son of God? Or how does these healings happen? And then also, so if it did happen, what is the message in that? Is it just the message to say, look at me, I'm this great guy? Or is there something deeper within this message? Healing takes place on two levels. The first level is the outer level. That's the material, the physical level. Your body heals. It can happen through two ways. The chemicals, so we get an injection or we drink medication, and that chemicals go into our blood system throughout the body, and it carries the chemical message of the cell for the cells to heal. So that's how healing takes place on a medical level. But there's also a healing taking place through the level of messaging, through the energy within these cells, the light within these cells. And I believe that is what we call our immune system. So when you have, not only, everybody always say, have happy thoughts and you will be happy. But what's your intentions? What is in your mind the whole time? If you rethink the whole time fear and sickness and illness, that manifests in your life. I don't even have to prove that. You know that. If we live in fear, it creates illness in our bodies. It comes and sits in your body. If you live in stress the whole time, you get a stomach ulcer. It's just the way things work, because your mental state carries the message to the cells and say, I am so stressed, and then the body can react and say, okay, I'll give you an ulcer to help you in your stress. The other side is also true. There are people healing themselves through the mind. And we have a saying that says, mind over matter. And there's truth in that saying. So when we come back to the healing that Jesus did in the city of Decapolis, now Decapolis means 10 cities or 10 big towns in our language. In those days they were cities. So in that area, Jesus was walking around and they brought this man to him, and this man was deaf and mute. Now we also understand that because we learn a language by hearing when we are little, and by then repeating, we start talking, and we know how to form the certain kind of sounds which we call words. Now if you listen to Greek, it just sounds like a lot of sounds. We don't make sense out of it because we haven't learned that sounds which we call the language. So we form the sounds because we hear it. So when somebody doesn't have hearing, they normally end up not able to speak because they can't hear the original sounds to learn to form them and then to speak. So this is the case of this man. He probably had to be deaf since birth, and therefore he couldn't learn to speak. So that's why we call him a deaf and mute man. And they brought him to Jesus, and they said, this man needs healing. And what did Jesus do? He put up a tent, and he invited all the people of the 10 cities to come into this tent, and he healed the man in front of the tent, saying, look at what I can do. No, come on. He took the man aside, quietly. He wasn't one of these evangelical churches saying, look at us, we're going to heal people today. Aside, quietly. And when he finished, he said to him, don't tell anybody. And there's a reason for that. So Jesus took this man aside, and by doing that, he said, this is a very personal thing that happens between you and me. And then he put his fingers into the ears of the man. Now, if you know the Middle East culture and the spirituality within the Middle East countries, this is an ordinary thing the Sufis do every day, till today. So they would take their fingers and put it in the ears of people. And what they actually do is teaching this person, block out the noise from outside and focus the attention on the noise or the sound within. So it's block out the outside world and focus on the inside world. So that's the first thing Jesus did. Put the fingers into the ears, kind of turning the hearing capability of a person around from we are listening to the outside, and suddenly he demonstrated now we need to listen to the inside. And that's a very important concept within spirituality across the Middle East. And that's why Jesus did this, put his fingers into the ears of that man. And then he spat and touched the tongue of the man. Again, in spirituality, when you touch somebody, you bring your frequency, the frequency that we looked at right at the beginning. Light is frequency. It's a wave or a particle, but there's a frequency there. And you bring your frequency in contact with this person in front of you, and there's an exchange of energy. That's why the physical touch is used by Jesus to exchange that energy from him to that person. There's another healing that took place with a woman that came up to him that was sick, and she just touched the seam of his robe. You remember that? And she was healed. Just by touching, that energy flow takes place, and then the healing could take place. Very easy, but there's something later on that makes this very complex. So when we look at this, putting the fingers in the ear, touching the tongue, there is something happening here on two levels that we spoke of. The one level is the outer level. There's a physical thing that happens, the touching, and then there's a deeper inner spiritual thing happening, the energy that exchange, the message that exchange, and the healing can take place. Outer healing, physical healing, is temporary. We can be healed today, and in a month or two this body will anyway die because of age. So it's temporary. But inner healing, the second level of healing that Jesus is doing here, is a transformation, and that is permanent. And when Jesus said, I do not teach anything without using parables, then we have to look at this also in that parable, and that is the parable. The story of the physical healing, and within that physical healing, there's a deeper message that says, I heal the body, but I'm also busy transforming the soul. And all the healings of Jesus, we have to acknowledge this, and we have to look at them in this sense. And then he did a strange thing. He sighed. Now, if you sigh, you go like, but you cannot go without. So a sigh has two sides. You breathe in and you breathe out. And that's why the gospel says Jesus looked up in the air and he sighed. So he breathed in the energy or the air, the oxygen or the photons, and then he breathed it out onto this man. And that's the complete sigh. And then he said, Ephphatha. Psalm 118 verse 19 says, open the doors of righteousness. It's written in original Hebrew. And the word that is used there, open up the doors, the open up, is the Hebrew word patu. So this is where this Aramaic word ephphatha comes from. Patu is a very interesting word. When the Israelites were in Egypt, in slavery, they came across with the Egyptian creation god called Ptah. And the Egyptian story of creation goes like Ptah, this Egyptian god, came and he opened up a space and then he created the universe within that space. That's the creation story in the Egyptian mythology. So the Israelites came into contact with this, and they took the name of that creator god, Ptah, and they used it within their language to say the same thing. Patu, open up. And in Aramaic, Ephphatha, open up. But open up means different things. First of all, it's a creation of space so that something can happen. Second of all, there must be a willingness so that something can happen. There must be a willingness to create space so that that thing that needs to happen, can have space to happen. So Ephphatha is really a loaded word that Jesus used there. He said, be open to the possibility, be open to create the space, be open for the miracle to take place. Because if you are closed and you just tell through your mind, this is impossible, this cannot happen, it won't happen. Mind over matter, remember? It won't happen. So that's why this Ephphatha word is so important within this miracle that Jesus is doing here. And when we hear that, we also see ourselves in that. Are we open to be transformed through the consciousness of Christ? Are we open to create space for that transformation? Are we open in having the willingness to go through that transformation? And then at that stage, when he spoke that word, breathed on this man, gave him the photons, the light energy of God, the miracle took place. He could hear and he could speak. That's the physical miracle. And the transformation, he could listen inside and he could speak the truth from inside. The Hebrew word is chokmah, wisdom. The Greek word in the New Testament is sophia, wisdom. And in search of that wisdom of God, Jesus taught us and that man. Shut your ears for all the noise on the outside and focus on the communication of God within you, because the light is within you. And that is an experience. That is a gut feel. You walk into a certain room or hallway and you just feel your body says, no, don't be here, get out of here. You feel that uncomfortable feeling. What is that? It's the message from inside that says something is wrong, get out of there. Or you walk into a place and you feel right at home and you just feel like, this is where I belong. Same thing. The message is carried by the light photons, and it tells the body to relax or either to stress. And that gives us the message to feel comfortable or uncomfortable. It's plain day-to-day science that we're talking about, and that is what's happening here. Jesus took the man aside, and in that silence, he touched his ears and tongue, and he breathed on him and says, Ephphatha. Physically, the man healed. He could hear and speak. But spiritually, that man was transformed. And he told him, please, don't go out and tell anybody, because the world is not Ephphatha. The world is not ready to create space. The world is not ready to have the willingness to react to this. The world will take this and just change and twist it in such a way that will suit them best. And we have seen that throughout history, how that happened. The healing of Christ is a personal encounter with you. It is Christ taking you apart, away from the crowds, silence you down, and focus you on the light within you, which carries the wisdom, the chokmah, the Sophia of Jesus Christ and of God. And it lies in that beautiful word that says, Ephphatha. So when we hear this, the whole picture of just an ordinary healing process of Jesus, walking the streets of Palestine, touching people and healing them, it changes that into the transformation that the Christ does, the transformation that Christ brings into your life. And at the end of all of this, the question remains, are you ready? Are you open? Are you willing? Is this just a show, or is this real stuff that faith is made of? Amen.